Going. Hi, David. Welcome to Venture with Grace. We're live.
Thank you, Grace. It's great to see you. It's great to be here.
Amazing. Okay, so to start the show, I would love for the audience to get to know you a little bit. Honestly, I was like listening to your other podcast, and then you mentioned that you were studying abroad at INSEAD, and then you were talking about you were making scrambled eggs and enjoy the beautiful weather and stuff. Sorry, this is like where I left off after the 45 different episodes. But anyway, so let's start with what were some core lessons that you've learned early on in your career that you kind of took into your life later on?
Great. Well, first of all, it's an honor to be with you. I love the fact that you're so entrepreneurial and you're open-minded and you're curious. Those are all very important traits for venture capital. They're also important traits for entrepreneurship. And they're good traits for a good life. So not everyone has those traits. You have some nature gifts and you have some nurture gifts. You've probably cultivated these things. So I want to compliment you and just say to folks that are listening, what Grace embodies and what I try and do sometimes, and the people we invest in have this sense of, I want to make a difference in the world. I have one life. I want to make it the fullest I can. I want to help other people. I want to do right by myself, my family, my community, my nation, and the world. Leave it a better place than we found it. And all that comes through this positive attitude, take responsibility, be curious, see the glass as half full rather than half empty. You can be skeptical, but do understand that there's a rainbow after every storm. Okay, so my lessons from life. Let's start with me as a youngster. One thing is to know what you should do and know what you shouldn't do. I had some great mentors. My parents were great people. My grandparents were great people. We have a great family, great neighborhood. I grew up in a small middle-class place called Fresno, California. Not a fancy place, not a pretentious place, not a bling-bling place. Fresno is very like the Midwest. So it's the Iowa of California. And that's a good thing. I think people who grow up with too much wealth and too much affluence and too much secularism, and I'll be controversial here, can become really jaded and end up thinking, I've seen it all, I've done it all, and they get very complacent or very self-satisfied. I like people who come from more hungry origin. If you're hungry, that means you haven't had everything. You've had to work, you had to do chores around the house, you had to take low-level entry jobs, you had to struggle in school, you had to work hard, you had to hone your muscles. If you're an athlete, you had to hone your brain. If you're a student, or hopefully you're both, and you have to hone your manners to be a polite person. You have to hone your control of your own demons. Everyone has their own demons. We call them passions or vices. Everyone battles the outside world. I'm oppressed, I'm this, I'm that. The major battle you have is with yourself. Self-control is so important in life. And many people, I think, who come from well-to-do backgrounds kind of think, no, that's not it. And they're looking somehow to become a victim, because victims are very chic. It's not chic to be a victim, and I don't mean to be making fun of anybody who's a victim, but it's not good to be a victim, and there's no shame in it, but you shouldn't glorify it either. So moving on, some things that impacted me. I had not only good role models, I had good role systems and values shown to me. One is through my faith, Judaism. The 10 Commandments are a great list of things to try and do. Not everyone can be perfect. I'm certainly not perfect at all, but it's a good aspirational list. Then I'd go to the Boy Scouts. The Boy Scouts at the time, I think they've changed a lot. I don't think they even exist as the Boy Scouts anymore. But when I was there, there was a code of conduct. One of the mottos was be prepared. That's such a great way to go through life. If you're prepared, you're going to do better than if you're not prepared. So, trustworthy, loyal, helpful, courteous, kind, thrifty, cheerful, clean, brave, reverent. These are some of the bands. I think I have them in the wrong order, but those are some of the values that the Boy Scouts taught. So one of the things that I was lucky to do was to learn that even though I loved science, I went on a Boy Scout trip to study medical careers because I thought I wanted to maybe go into medicine. And so I went to UCLA and USC. We took a big bus. We went down for a day. At the end of that, I realized I didn't want to do medicine. And it was because I had a self-realization. I realized that a lot of medicine, not all, but a lot of part I was exposed to, especially in the hospitals, was dealing with people at the end of their lives. And as beautiful as helping people are at that, I wanted to work with people. I made that realization very early. I wanted to work with people early in their careers and have a relationship for decades with people. Now, if you're a doctor working with people who are in gerontology world, you're going to work with them for a little while, and then unfortunately, as is the way of nature and all things, we die. So I didn't want to work with people and then end that relationship. I wanted to work with people from the beginning for decades. So that was a good realization. Then I thought I probably wanted to go and help solve big problems in the world. I thought, oh, I should be a lawyer and then work for the government in Washington and help do trade deals or do negotiations or be a governor or a senator or something like that. So I worked in Washington for 3 summers. At the end of those 3 summers, my big takeaway was government is the place where they cause problems, they don't solve them. They try, and I'm not putting aspersions that people in government are evil people. In most cases, they're not. Most people, they're very good people. But the systems of government lack accountability, especially in the bureaucratic areas, in the agencies. In the Congress, in the presidency, we can elect them and diselect them. We can throw them out of office. The bureaucrats, much harder. So they don't generally follow a lot of the rules that, say, a business would follow. If you run a business and you don't serve a good product, you will go bankrupt. I like to make the analogy, if you own a restaurant and it serves bad food, not going to work. If you charge prices that are too high, not going to work. If you charge prices that are too low, you'll lose money, you'll go out of business that way. So there are many ways you can lose business. The only way you can win in business is if you're serving your product to the right customer with the right value proposition. And you're constantly learning and adapting because things change. Prices change because of inflation. Technology changes, tastes can change, geography can change because of zoning or changes in the economy in your region. So you constantly have to be adapting. I'll pause there. Those are a few things. There's a lot more, but I'll just pause there and then we can go into my college experience and all that.
For sure. Okay, so I'm hearing, I really like what you said about, building the relationship from the very beginning, and then so the relationship could last very long, and have find the right customer with the right value proposition, and then always be adapting. I feel like those are some really important facts. I guess, who is on your personal board of advisors? I guess, where do you learn these things from at the very beginning?
It's great. I will get to that. I'm going to go now reach myself back in college. I was from a middle-class school. I went to Harvard College. I needed to work to make money because it was very expensive, and I had some scholarships. My parents helped when they could, but I needed to work as well. So I got a job at Harvard Student Agencies. I'll give a shout out to my roommate, Nathan Light, helped me, who now lives in Florida where I do, helped me get that job. And then the next year I became a manager of my own agency called Harvard Distribution Services. And that was an agency that we created from whole cloth. It was brand new. And we were serving customers, the administration of Harvard and outside advertisers, to distribute flyers and newspapers to the college campus doors. Every room in the campus we were able to deliver it to on a daily basis. And we also did it to outside and other universities and we did courier services and a lot of other things. Anyway, there it taught me, again, accountability. When a customer asks you to do a job and you fulfill it, you get rewarded and you get paid. If you don't fulfill it, you may get paid, but you get a lot of flack. So that accountability of doing the right job on the right time in the right manner is what customers expect and demand. It's very, very motivating, and it teaches you to do the right thing. If you screw up, you suffer and your employees suffer and so on. So that was really good. You get you up out of bed on time and all those things. Number 2, I did a thesis, and I'm not going to go into huge detail about it, but my thesis in college was on African-Israeli relations between 1973 and 81. Now, in 1973, there was the Yom Kippur War. All the Arab, not all, but many of the Arab countries attacked Israel. Israel was able to defend themselves, fight off the attack. But as the end of the war, many of the Arab countries declared a huge oil embargo against the United States, against the Netherlands, against, of course, Israel, and anybody else who was helping Israel. So a lot of sub-Saharan African countries had good, productive diplomatic ties with Israel in that period, they were forced to break those ties. They didn't really want to, but the Arab countries said, if you don't break ties, we're not going to help you at the UN. We're not going to give you loans. We're not going to give you investments. So most of those ties, about 31 countries, broke off ties. Nevertheless, in those next 8 years, trade and investment between sub-Saharan Africa, and I'm not talking about South Africa, I'm talking about the other countries, increased 800%. Investment increased. The number of Israeli schools in Africa increased. The number of pilgrimages of both Muslims and Christians to the Holy Land increased. So I thought, this is very weird. Military cooperation increased. So I thought, this is weird. No diplomatic ties. They've broken, and yet everything else is getting better than it was. How is that possible? And to summarize the statement of a diplomat from the UN, from Africa at the UN, I won't say his name, he said to me, David, what we say at the UN is one thing, what we do is entirely another. So I realized that there was a huge gap often in rhetoric versus reality, especially in the political realm. So that was a big learning to me. So I had a very positive experience with Harvard student agencies running a business as an entrepreneur. I had these 3 internships in Washington, which disillusioned me a lot about Washington. I had this thesis, this academic exercise where I realized what was really the thing that kept things going. National interest, real interest, political interest were less important. It was the economic interest, the military interest, the cultural or religious interest that kept those ties together. And what I then found the most important thing where I thought I could have a strength was where science, which I love and respect and admire, meets capitalism. When you have those two things together, science and capitalism, you get entrepreneurship that fulfills the needs of the world for progress, material progress, making our lives better than our ancestors. I'll ask your audience, I want each of you to think about this. Would any of you change places for a better material life and a more fulfilling life than your great-great-grandparents? I think almost no one would. There may be a few of you who are descendants from earls and dukes and kings and queens and shahs and potentates, but most of the rest of us had pretty miserable lives in even the 19th century. The average age of an American male life expectancy in 1900 was 43, lower for women. So life was really tough. Childbirth was tough for women. Work was tough for both sexes. It was not easy. We take it for granted now. Basic things like electricity. We take things for granted. The fact that right now, the average American middle-class person has 75 machine equivalents of people doing work to make their life better. The air conditioning, the car, the dishwasher, and it goes on and on. In the old days, your great-great-great-grandparents' times, you needed servants, or God forbid, slaves, to do that kind of work for you, and it still wasn't the same quality as we get today. So we live in a very blessed time. I like to say we stand on the shoulders of giants who came before us. Our ancestors were very proud, brave, tenacious people. Remember, you're the descendant, each individual I'm talking to, you are the descendant of thousands of people who had to survive very difficult conditions. I don't care what color they were, what religion they were, what geography they came from. Everybody had a tough life in the old days, whether it was malaria or it was slavery, or it was oppression, or it was wars, or it was just the murderer down the street. People had really tough lives. And so we are lucky to be here on Earth. And I want us to take it as a blessing. It's not an accident, and it's not a thing that we should take for granted. We should appreciate every day. And again, those are some of the values that I've learned. And it also makes you have a happier life. If I follow a gentleman named Dennis Prager, and he needs wishes and prayers for full recovery. He fell in a bathroom. Here's another tip. Don't walk around in a wet bathroom. It's very slippery. Be careful because you can fall and slip and hurt yourself. Anyway, he did. He's getting better now. But he says we should be grateful because gratitude is one of the fundamental virtues. And grateful people are better people. They are nicer. They're more accommodating. They're more achieving. They are people who understand that the whole world doesn't revolve around them. When you're grateful, it's hard to be a narcissist. So be grateful. It will help you in your life. You'll be a happier person, and you'll be a better person to work with as a team leader. There's a whole school of thought of servant-led management. It's a whole school of thought for CEOs. And you think of yourself, I'm here to lead the organization through service and through empowering other people. So I'll pause there, Grace. Now, you asked about mentors. Let me go to mentors. I've been very blessed to have a number of great mentors. There were a number of mentors in the college days, some great professors who helped me with my thesis and so on. And hold on one second. I just have to respond to one thing. Yes. Okay, sorry. Just as a side note, I'm going to the State of the Union as a guest in Capitol Hill tonight. So that's going to be fun. And another congressperson was asking me if I need a ticket, but I got one already. So thank you both. Two congresswomen asked me for these to offer me a ticket. So that's very nice. Thank you, both of you. I'm going to be there. Anyway, back to topic. I've had some amazing mentors in life. There's so many, but I'll say, rabbis, camp counselors, scout leaders have been helpful. Teachers at school, parents, most of all, and grandparents. Those are that's the most important one. That everyone, should be really happy. And I'm going to say another thing. I'm pretty intolerant of people that they come from a dysfunctional family. All families are somewhat dysfunctional, but don't overplay it. And I'm not talking about people who are abused, God forbid. And I have only empathy and sorrow for those people who are truly abused. But every family has its issues of jealousy and rivalry and so on and so forth. But most of the time, if you have at least one, but hopefully two parents in your life, or sometimes with more complicated divorce situations, you have 3 or 4 parents in your lives, grasp onto their wisdom. Most of the time, they have your best interest at heart. There are occasions when they don't, but most of the time, your family really wants what's best for you, and you can learn a lot of lessons. Okay, now back to people. Specifically, I would say that in my post school period, I would shout out to Abby Joseph Cohen. She was the one who hired me at Rowe Price. That was an excellent position for me to go to as an assistant securities analyst at Rowe Price. I learned to analyze large companies from a holistic point of view, not only the financial information, but their marketing plan, their technological superiority and sustainability over the long term. Now, I'll pause and say that venture capital, which is the career I've eventually done, is a very long-term business. Our relationships with our entrepreneurs can span a few years at a minimum to decades, really decades, which is wonderful and a longer-term relationship. And so T. Rowe Price was not a day trader, not a short-term in and out kind of transactional business, or an investment bank where you're essentially a broker. T. Rowe Price was an asset manager, a principal. We're buying to hold, and we succeed if you succeed. A broker does no aspersions on them, but they don't really have the same interest. They just want to get a transaction done. If you're buying as an investor, you want to make sure that the company does well so that you do well. It's more alignment of interest. So I was very lucky to be at T. Rowe Price. Then I was very lucky to meet another huge mentor of mine, Frederick Adler, and may he rest in peace. He was an amazing venture capitalist, probably one of the top 5 venture capitalists of his time. He was active in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, I think even into the early 2000s. He passed away some number of years ago. After an extremely successful career, he had started as a lawyer and then had helped some of his clients raise money. He invested himself, and then he really merged mainly into venture capitalists and even did some private equity. So he was a huge mentor to me. He was also one of the only American venture capitalists who was willing to go outside of the United States and invest in Israel and in Canada and in Europe early on. Most American VCs only invested in their own city or nearby. He was broader in his purpose. And just to talk about the Israel point, one time I was in his office, the head of DARPA came to visit him. And the gentleman, I forget his name, but he was a very famous guy. He said to Fred Adler, I have only one question for you. There are a lot of places you could invest, a lot of places you could make money. Why do you invest in Israel? Israel is small, it's far away, it doesn't have US GAAP rules. Back at the time, it had high inflation, it has wars, it has terrorism. They're hard to deal with, those people. What is it? And Fred, I said, I have not one reason, I have 3 reasons why I invest in Israel. brains, brains, brains. What Fred Adler was saying was that there were some very intelligent people there, particularly scientists and technological workers, that he could tap into and that would create innovative either silicon chips or software or other products. And Fred did make a huge fortune there, and I've done pretty well investing there, and most people who invested in Israel over the last few decades have as well. Because we live in a world where the mind, information, data play a huge part in finding value, finding alpha. In the 19th century, 18th century and below, it was all about land. It was entirely an agricultural society. At the time of the revolution, 95% of Americans worked in rural America, most of them on farms and in related industries. And that was automated with the cotton gin and with the tractor and the combine harvester and so on. And today, only 2% of Americans work in farming. And yet, those 2% are much more productive than that 95% back in the day of 1776. We produce much more food at much lower cost and at per pound and inflation adjusted, and much safer quality food and much higher nutritious food. So we do much more productivity was injected into the agricultural system. We automated most of agriculture. Then in the 19th century and early 20th century, pretty much the US, Germany, Europe, and Japan automated the the world, the factory. Factories of today look nothing like the factories of 200 or 100 years ago, with lots and lots of people standing doing sewing or whatever. Now, most of that is automated. Many factories work 24/7, lights out, entirely done by robots and machines and so on. I've been to a few factories recently. You can eat off the floor. They're so clean. They're quiet. The machines are humming along, doing milling work or sewing or whatever it is. So that was automated. But today, let's move up today. Today, the great future for most of you listening is in the world of information. It's the service economy, it's the information economy that's becoming automated and more intelligent, more capable, more creative, more flexible. All of those adjectives describe what our Blumberg Capital investments are, and most of the folks that I know in Silicon Valley are investing in. We're investing in productivity for the future. And again, in the 1776, 95% of people worked in agriculture. By the Civil War, 1860, 40% worked in agriculture, 40% of Americans worked in factories, 20% in the service economy. Today, I think it's something like 90% of people are in the service economy. Maybe 10 are in factories and maybe 2, 3 in agriculture. So we're a very service economy. Service economy does include information. So lawyers, doctors, accountants, consultants, high tech, essentially is in that information economy. So Blumberg Capital is mostly investing in businesses that are trying to bring productivity and novel capabilities to mainly the global 10,000, the largest companies. We have some of our investments that serve smaller and medium-sized businesses, but most, I would say 80% of our investments are in companies serving large enterprises. And a lot of it also bubbles down or spreads to consumers. And sometimes consumer innovation leads, and then it bubbles up to being used by large corporations. And I would give the example of the mobile phone. There was a time when mobile phones were prohibited for enterprise software applications. Today, almost every large corporation allows and enables secure communications and applications through their mobile phones. But before long, many years ago, it was the opposite. It was almost prohibited because they thought it was a security risk, they couldn't control it, and so on. Anyway, you asked about mentors. 3 other people. I'd like to mention Alan Patrikoff, who in his 90s is still an active venture capitalist. He's a wonderful man. He was also a mentor to me and has been a hero for many people along the years. Charles Bronfman, I had the pleasure of working for in his family office in Montreal, a gentleman and a scholar. He's one of the most philanthropic people I know. He started the whole Birthright program with Michael Steinhardt and other great philanthropists. He has given just enormous amount of wise philanthropy to many causes in Canada, US, Israel, and internationally. And I continue to look to people to be mentors today. I'm more senior in my age, but everyone should have a mentor. And the mentors can sometimes be younger than you, because you can always learn from somebody about something that they know better than you. So I try and find people and learn from them, whether they're young or old, near or far, in my domain or in something new that I want to learn. Just be a little bit humble, just be open. As you said, be curious. Those are great skills to have. And then you'll find the right mentors. When you find the right mentors, they're a heuristic. Mentors don't do work that you couldn't do yourself, but they help you do it faster, and they cut through a lot of the nonsense to help you find the real nuggets of wisdom and truth.
Wow, that's so deep. Anyway, wanted to say hi to the audience. Hi, Tracy. Okay, so I wonder, when you were thinking about building your own fund, since your fund was started like 34 years ago, and why don't we talk about like what were the, I guess, like the revolution kind of like look like from fund one to now, and I guess like maybe can you go back to, I guess, the year one? What does it look like? And then when you're fundraising, what were people saying to you? And how do you deal with, I mean, like, because we have a lot of guests who started their own fund coming onto the show. And like a lot of people say, it took them like pitching over 1,000 people to start their first fund. What was it like kind of for you? And then how do you deal with rejections, if any? Like, how do you deal with people who are saying, oh, this will never work and stuff like that?
Well, I'm an entrepreneur. As I told you, I started my first company when I was in college. I actually started before that in high school. I had some things. And the first thing an entrepreneur learns is to overcome objections. Mm-hmm. Whether you're going to overcome it with each customer, probably not. But if you talk to enough potential customers, hopefully you'll find one. And that's what is so exciting about entrepreneurs, that they're persistent. And for those of you who come from a culture that says, oh, just stick with the crowd, do what everybody else does, don't stick out. In Australia, they call it the tall poppy syndrome. Tall poppy in the field gets knocked down by the wind. In Asia, there's a thing about the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. But also in Asia, there's a phrase, fall down 7 times, 7, get up 8. Mm. Okay, there are some beautiful stories like that about a scholar who's trying to pitch something to the emperor. I can't remember if it's in Japan or in China, and maybe it's where this fall down 7, get up 8 comes from. But the philosopher is walking, that's advisor to the emperor is walking in the garden, and it's a rainstorm, and he sees a little spider, and the spider's trying to climb up the web to reach, I guess, a piece of prey, a fly or something, and keeps getting knocked down by the rain. And then on the 8th try, grabs the fly. So that's the spirit. Keep trying is what entrepreneurs need to do. Now, you should learn from your rejections. If you're selling something that nobody's buying and they're just giving you good reasons why no, then maybe you need to change your idea. But often they're not giving you good reasons. They're just afraid of the future. They're afraid of change. They're afraid of something that they've never seen before. Then you have to really, listen to yourself. So it's a combination of learning from outside information and data, and being confident that you've seen something new and fresh and of value. I'm going to pause, if you permit me, Grace. I want to quote another great mentor. I met him only once. An amazing man. He's now passed away, and again, he should rest in peace. Professor Walter Williams. And there's a great video on PragerU that you can see where he describes the system of capitalism. And he starts off with a dirty word. Many people think profit is a dirty word. It's just shame, because profit is actually a beautiful word. Profit often is thought of as a substitute for greed, or winning by any means, or something exploitive. No. What Walter Williams, this professor who grew up very poor in the rural South, and he became a very distinguished professor at George Mason University. Go watch his YouTube video on PragerU. He says that properly understood, profit is a sign that you've served your fellow human being. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about exploitive capitalism. We're talking about where people have free information, full information. They can make a choice between this product and that product, and they're taking out of their pocket, they're reaching in for their money, and they're going to buy something you've created. Now, they're doing that because you're offering them something that they couldn't, for the same price and time value, get for themselves. When I go to the supermarket, to make a simple example, and I buy tomatoes, well, I can't grow tomatoes so easily at my house in the quantity and the repeatability that I would want, especially if I live in, frosty Montreal or New York or somewhere like that. There are competitive advantages of different producers in different places all around the world. So profit is a sign that you've actually done all that hard work in your competitive advantage area. You've delivered something of value to other people, and they're willing to transact as free individuals. That is a beautiful thing. That is the market at work. And so profit should get a positive valence ethically, morally. You're serving your fellow human being. Okay, that's a sidebar. You asked about starting a fund. So recall Fred Adler. All right. So I was in business school, and I was still working for Rowe Price as a stringer. Stringer is a part-time worker. So I was helping pay my way through school, and I would do reports for Rowe Price. I was out in Silicon Valley at Stanford Business School. And so I would go to annual meetings of companies that they were shareholders in, and I would take the notes and report back to them. This is the time before Zoom calls, and this is the time before mobile phones. I had to do it, by hand. I'd write these reports, type them up on a typewriter. You guys don't even know what a typewriter is. But then I would send them into the headquarters back in Baltimore. In any case, Fred Adler walked up to me. I had met him at Rowe Price because I had been buying his stocks when they went IPO sometimes, and he knew me. And he said to me, "Blumberg, what are you doing on the West Coast?" I said, "Well, I'm here at Stanford Business School." He said, "Oh, I thought you finished." I said, No, I'm in my first year." And he said, "Well, don't look for a summer job." I said, "But I need a summer job. I need to work." And he said, "But you're already hired." He said, "By who?" He said, "By me." Now that man, Fred Adler, was the only person I wanted to work for in the whole world. I had one job goal. It was to work in venture capital and to work somehow with US and Israel. He was the only guy in the whole world that did that at that point. So I was being forced to work for the guy that I wanted to work for. So it was like lightning. So sometimes that will happen in your life. There will be these points where what you want and what the world wants for you come together. And you can call it God, you can call it fate, you can call it luck, I don't know. But I do know that if you're prepared, you help make your own luck. The fact that he knew that I was interested in his business, I was relatively, capable, and had that determination and persistence, caused him to pick me rather than a random other person. So I was prepared to cite the old Boy Scout model. One other time, then for a while, I didn't have a fund. I worked for him, then I worked for Charles Bronfman, then I came back to San Francisco, and I was really consulting. I was talking to some people about starting a fund, a U.S.-Israel fund, and then there was, I think, a war or a recession. I can't remember what happened, but that plan sort of collapsed. So I did consulting, where I would work for wealthy family offices. I would find deals like a VC, and we did 9 of them, and we had a 9x cash-on-cash return. It was a very good portfolio. Small, but very good. We did 9 different deals. 1 died, 4 acquisitions, 4 IPOs. So
wow.
Good track record. Around that time, I was speaking at conferences, and I spoke at a conference in Arizona. I remember SRI, so I can give another shout out. Stuart Williams, the founder of SRI, great man, gave me a lot of speaking opportunities that I maybe didn't deserve. But that's another thing. When you're in a chance to give somebody a chance to grow and speak and promote, like what you're doing right now, Grace, it's a wonderful gift because people need a little airtime to be heard. So Stuart Williams, SRI, gave me a chance to speak at a conference. I spoke about some deal we were working on the consulting side, and young man came to me and said, "Mr. Blumberg, I'm working for a large family office from Europe. I'm at UCLA Business School. I'm going to be over there for the summer. I think they'd be interested to know more about Blumberg Capital and what you're doing." I said, "Great." Then he called back another day and he said, "Can you present to me what you're doing in Blumberg Capital?" So I did a whole presentation for him. He said, "Are you going to be in London anytime soon?" I said, "Yes, in June, such and such, I'm going to speak at another conference." He said, "Great. Hold on one moment." He turned to somebody back in his office, and he turned back to me and said, "Mr. Blumberg, I'm very sorry. On that Thursday when you're speaking, Lord Rothschild will not be able to be attending your speech because he's going to be at his vacation home in Corfu in Greece. But if you could wait around through the weekend, he'd love to have you out to his estate near Oxford as his guest." And so I said, wouldn't want to do that. No. I said, "I'll be there." And so I was asked to come to Lord Rothschild's estate and the Rothschild family became our first investors. So again, lightning struck. I was very, very fortunate. And then we, on the basis of a lead investor like that, we were able to raise a number of other investors, and now we've raised 6 funds since then, and made hundreds of investments, and have wonderful track record, and grown a firm now. We're 27 people. Number of folks who have spun off have created their own funds. I'm very proud of our alumni network. I think there must be maybe 8 or 9 funds that have come from this trunk of the tree and then spread out. And if I go back to where I started at Fred Adler, many, many funds came out of Adler and Company, including Accel Partners, TA Associates, many, many others, and Little Blumberg Capital. So mentors are very important. Giving credit, being grateful for other people, giving other people opportunities, learning from others. Those are all keys to success. Again, it'll make you a happier person, a more humble person, and more fulfilled, I think, which is the most important thing. People confuse happiness with fulfillment. And I'll quote a woman named Beverly Sills. She was a great opera star, probably 30, 40 years ago, from New York. Humble beginnings. She grew up in Brooklyn, not a wealthy family. She had a very difficult family life. I think she had children that were ill. Her husband was ill. I don't remember all the details, but she had a lot of struggles in her personal life, and she had this exceptionally high performing career, both as a performer and a musician, and I think she was head of Lincoln Center and so on. Anyway, they said to her, "Well, Mrs. Sills, are you happy in your life?" She said, "I'm not sure happy is the point. Fulfilled. I feel very, very fulfilled." And I think that is an important distinction, and something that people can be keeping in mind. It's not always easy to be happy. And I'll give one more saying from Dennis Prager. He says that happiness is often misunderstood. Happiness is thought of as something that's sort of selfish. It's, I want to be happy for my own pleasure. Well, but it's more than that. That's fine. That's okay. That's the first level. But the second level is happiness as a service. Happiness as a ethical mandate for you to share happiness with other people. And I don't mean slapstick, silly, and when there's a sad thing happen, you don't have to be happy. But what it means is that if you're in a bad mood, don't infect other people with that. Everybody knows the people who bring energy to a room and the people who suck energy from a room. Be the person that adds energy, not in an inappropriate way, not at a funeral. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about normal day-to-day transactions. Try to be the person who doesn't gossip. Try to be the person that's the inspirational, that people want to be with because they make them feel more productive and more effective. That's a kind of fulfilling happiness that we're talking about. Okay, back to you, Grace. Mentors, very important.
Wow. Okay. Wanted to say hi to the audience. Hi, Deepak. So I wonder, when you're thinking about, like, in terms of, I guess, like, since, like, you talk about, like, there's a lot of mentors of yours, and then when you were presenting on stage, and then there were, I guess, potential LPs that kind of, like, just, like, invited you to chat with them, and then seems like that's, like, the way that how you kind of got started, beyond having a great mentor who were, I guess, like, giving you a shot, and then, like, helping you to, like, I guess, build a career in investing. I wonder if you were starting a fund today, how would you navigate the climate today? Since, like, right now, I feel like when you started, maybe there weren't, like, venture capital was, like, just the beginning, as you mentioned. After T. Rowe Press, there was, like, a lot of different firms that started all together at the same, I guess, same time. But nowadays, like, I feel like there's so many different funds. How do you think about competing in the current climate in terms of deal flow and everything?
Great question. Okay, and I'll go back to when I started. Remember, venture capital when I started was an extremely small industry. Almost nobody knew what it was. I had to explain to my parents probably 100 times before they understood what I did. But 1985 was my class at business school at Stanford. Was the first year that several of us went into the venture capital industry. There were, I think, 5 of us that got jobs straight away. Most people had to work for many years in entrepreneurship, in big companies, in startups, and then they would go into venture capital. This was the first year that several of us were hired directly. I went to Adler, Jeff Yang went to places, Brody, David Jaffee. There were a number of us who went into venture. Lucier, Steve Krause. I'm forgetting a few, probably forgive me. But there were a lot of us who went right in. It was a very small boutique industry. There were no big firms, and there were few firms. It was definitely an old boys network. Not in the bad sense. I don't think people were racist or sexist particularly. There were some, but it wasn't that. It was that they were people who knew each other from a certain class. They were mostly from Stanford Business School or Harvard Business School or something like that, or MIT. And they lived mostly in Boston, New York, and San Francisco. The world has changed dramatically for the better. It's expanded enormously. There are some venture capital funds that are doing terrible deals and losing money, and there are some that are doing exceptionally well, and there are a bunch in the middle. On the whole, the venture capital industry is extremely important, extremely productive, and extremely valuable to any country that's lucky enough to have one. United States, Israel, Europe, Canada are lucky to have venture capital industries. India and China, I know less about, but I know that that's happening there too. There are some incipient venture capital firms, not a lot, but there are some in Latin America and Africa. Certainly there are a number in Asia. It's growing. Venture capitalists are like honeybees. We fertilize the flowers of entrepreneurs. And so we have to be talking to a lot of them and have a network. And one of the biggest skills of a venture capitalist is to have a value-added network that can help the entrepreneurs beyond what you give in money, help them with other things. Finding early customers if you're an early stage venture capitalist, helping them recruit additional people to the team. If that personnel function is something you can provide, helping them raise more money from other VCs in future rounds is important. Strategic guidance, experience with arrows in our back from problems we've had, try and help you not suffer those same problems. Finding you and referring you to great service providers, lawyers, accountants, consultants, and so on. But this is all part of our toolkit. We have something that I would highlight that I think helps a firm. It's when you ask what distinguishes a firm. We have something called an innovation council. It's been 20 years old. It's now about 200 people. Maybe I shouldn't say who, but we got a very senior officer from Meta recently to join our CIO council. Very exciting. We have many of these large Fortune 500 companies represented, as well as smaller ones. They get together about 4 times a year. They are meeting mostly in New York and San Francisco, and virtually, in person and virtual. We also have a Miami chapter now. And we get them together to talk about, first, topics of interest to them. What's on their mind? We pick a topic each session, whether it's use of AI for certain production techniques and issues, or mobility in the workplace, what are best practices in certain using mobile phones for different techniques, and what is security practices, or any variety of different things. And then we have usually a couple of our portfolio companies, either ones we've already invested in or ones we're considering investing in, present. It's extremely valuable. And I'll give an example with Nutanix. One of our great unicorn successes is a company from Silicon Valley, San Jose, called Nutanix. Our CIO council years ago had been telling us that digital storage demands were growing exponentially. Okay, they were not just growing in a linear fashion, more and more and more, but it was more, a lot more. And so the CEO or the CFO was telling the CTO of most companies, or the CIO, you can't spend so much on digital storage. You have to find a lower cost curve. You can't keep buying more and more big, expensive machines from, say, VMware or whoever it was that was the system provider, hardware and software combined. So these 3 guys, immigrants from India, graduates of the IIT. One of them was considered one of the 50 top programmers in the world. I don't know how they measure that, but he was there. 2 guys were at Oracle. He was at Google. The 3 of them came together and they came to us and they said, look, we've seen how Google does digital storage expansion. They don't wait to buy another huge system from VMware or somebody else every 6 months. They have racks and they put in standard servers, and then they have very smart software engineers that know how to write the software to distribute the load as appropriate for their needs. And it was growing really fast. Google, of course, at the time was exceptional company with exceptional engineers. They said, we're here to build that product for everybody else, because not everybody else has the Google engineers. So they said, we're going to use standard hardware and then put the smarts in the software. So we brought this proposition to the CIO Council, and we said, if the Nutanix guys built this, would any of you want to buy it? 3 or 4 hands went up. A big law firm called Weil Gotshal, I think UBS, the bank, and I can't remember the third. Anyway, those folks became early customers. And that's the kind of thing we like to do. So the CIOs, the CISOs, the CTOs that are on our Innovation Council love getting together because they learn from each other. And then they see vetted companies that we're bringing in that are solving novel problems that they may have never seen before because they're at such a high level in the organization. They don't have time to look at thousands of startups. That's our job. So that's an Innovation Council. That's been very helpful to Blumberg Capital. I would recommend that kind of thing. We're willing to cooperate with other venture firms in that mode. That's one thing. Another thing to remember is that venture has changed dramatically. In the old days, in Silicon Valley especially, and in around Boston, it was a hardware and software dominated business. It was very much semiconductors, semiconductor test equipment, semiconductor design, which was more software. And then it really sprung into the software world. But first you had to build the hardware. And there was a whole generation that was very active in telecoms, mostly hardware, and fiber optics and all that stuff. So a lot of the early days of venture were almost a different animal than today. Today, most of it's software, most of it's SaaS. In my early days, SaaS did not exist. You had to sell a whole system. You had to understand the production environment of the customer. Each one was different than the other. It was much harder to be an entrepreneur in those days, and it was harder to be a VC. It is easier because of cloud infrastructure, because of SaaS models, and because we mostly rely on software, which is easier to tweak. When you have a hardware problem, it's a pain. You have to do new molds and new configurations and new testing. Software, you change the code, and I'm not saying it's always easy, but it's easier in most cases than changing hardware. So the industry has dematerialized. It's become more electrons rather than atoms. And there are people like Peter Thiel and others who are brave and smart and do a lot of things in the atoms world. Blumberg Capital is mostly, not only, but mostly in the software world, B2B software. But I would say for people starting funds now, there are benefits in being a generalist, and there are benefits in being a specialist. And I think you have to know where your advantages are and to play to those advantages. If you have a specialty advantage, understand that you've got to be good at it. And if you're too narrow, the winds of change might knock you off your perch. For example, and I was on a board of a solar energy company years ago. I didn't choose to make the investment, but I went to work for a family office. They had it in their portfolio. They put me on the board. And what I said to them is, well, this is the most interesting company I've been on the board of, but it's the most risky because it not only had the typical risks of technological competition, of getting customers, of increasing rounds of financing. It had oil price risk. It had interest rate risk for project finance. They had to raise $100 million to build the plant before they could, before they had the customer. They had to build it before they had the customer. They had labor union risk, which most tech companies didn't have at the time, software, et cetera, et cetera. So I learned that, and they had political risk because when the political winds changed, the subsidies went away or the mandates, and the company, ultimately went bankrupt. So I think that if you're in an area, pick an area that is going to be enduring, right, growing. I think you're pretty safe in the AI area, broadly construed. I think you're safe in the biotech area. The problem with biotech, among others, is the huge delay and cost factor getting through FDA. So if you can get in biotech on the data side, which is the way we play it, we do health tech. We don't do much pharma development. We don't do much in the devices area. But if we love data as applied to medical, whether it's for diagnosis or payments or operations or something like that, training, those all work because they don't go through such difficult regulatory barriers. What else? I think it's interesting to look at changes. There are many kinds of changes. One kind of change that's most important in Silicon Valley is technological change, but there's also demographic change. There's also taste, in case you're in the consumer side. People's tastes change. One year it's black is the color, another year orange is the color, next year aquamarine is the color of fashion. So that's not our area, but people who are in it know better than me. So demographics, technology change. There's also regulatory change. For example, when I was a kid, airlines were highly regulated and they were high priced and there were few routes. In Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, two odd bedfellows, combined to deregulate the airlines industry and the trucking industry, which brought in a lot more competition, lowered the price of those services, and inspired a huge number of new entrepreneurs to get in the business and start competing. Like Southwest Airlines came out of that, and JetBlue and Virgin and so on and so forth. In Europe, Ryanair, other ones that were less regulated and were able to offer more value and bring more customers in at lower price points. So those are all kinds of changes that one can look for as a thesis to invest under. And I'll pause there, but those are a few of the things that I've seen venture change. It's gone much more software, and of course there are a lot of deep tech funds now, which I salute and applaud, and we would certainly look at some of those kinds of things as well. But it used to be almost all hardware, and now it's mostly software.
Wow, I feel like some of the things that as you mentioned, being AI is kind of safe right now. I guess what are something that, since I feel like you started investing in B2B software a long time ago, and then I think that's obviously a really great way now looking back, or a really great sector to put your effort and energy in. And you had experience between US and Israel, which is you mentioned, investing in the best talents. And what would you say would be important for the next, call it 10 years or so? Obviously, I guess being in AI is kind of safe, but I think AI is becoming something that's literally that's everything is AI. It's kind of like the internet era. So I wonder, what are something specifically that you personally feel worth people investing time and energy in?
Yeah. Something that we'd like to see from those of you who are listening or who are entrepreneurs, we'd like to see things that are exploiting what are called LQMs. Who knows what that is? Do you know what that is?
No.
Large quantitative models. A little bit different from large language models, because language models are sucking in all the data that's on the internet, and it's generally public. We're interested in private data sets. What we've been investing in for the past decade or so is various kinds of algorithms, some of them AI, some others, that are applied to data sets that can give you a lasting, sustainable advantage as a business. So we call it building a data moat. All right. So it could be data from mining, where you have some public data like US Geological Survey, and then you combine that with private data sets from the mining companies you're working with. One of our portfolio companies, ver-ai.com, ver-ai.com, is doing a beautiful job of this. They just announced a new financing with INSEAD Venture Partners, and they also announced an amazing find in Canada of copper ore, where instead of having to drill 10,000 holes or 1,000 holes to find the ore bodies, drill 10. So much more efficient. So it's faster, it's less expensive, and it does less environmental damage to the terrain. All those are benefits in that mining world. Whereas finding cancer early, detecting cancer, a company called Imagene, also based in Miami near me, with the original engineering technology from Israel, they're able to do in 1 minute what usually takes 4 weeks for the geneticists to determine what kind of genetics is this cancer, hard tumor cancer, say lung cancer, and it's saving people's lives. Because that quick diagnosis can get you on the therapy right away instead of delaying it. So I think that area of large quantitative models is inherently proprietary in most cases. Radiology data, insurance underwriting data, loan underwriting data, mining, cancer, you pick your domain. There's almost always some proprietary data sets that are not out there on the internet and are not part of the large learning models. But specifically, they can be part of a large quantitative model, which often may have even a different algorithm and different optimizations. That's what we're looking for. And it's been successful. Some of our latest companies, Firm Pilot helps lawyers to advertise properly. if you're a lawyer who does land use planning, how do you advertise? It's not obvious. Well, you have to sound smart to people who care about your subject. So this AI helps take information from new cases that have been decided, new laws that have been passed, insights from the law firm who's advertising, puts them on the appropriate media sites for those people who read that sort of thing, help you target your customers with something that makes you sound smart and effective. We have a new one called Telin AI that helps accounting firms. A typical accounting firm, when they're auditing travel and entertainment expenses, looking for the receipts, they might audit by sampling 1% to 3% of receipts. Telin can look using computer vision 100% of the receipts, and we'll find more errors and more fraud, and we'll find patterns that would not otherwise show up to say, oh, we seem to be, as our consulting firm, sending a lot of people to the Southwest. We should probably get a discount rate at a hotel in Phoenix. That's as an example. So these are all kinds of ways that AI can be applied. I think there are a lot of other areas. I'm very excited about biotechnology. Again, we don't do much of it, but the computer bringing modeling instead of the wet labs into play will advance medical research much, much faster. So that's very exciting. Cybersecurity is the endless game of cat and mouse. So there's always new areas in cybersecurity. Defense is an area that we're starting to get into because, as we learned from the tragic Israel-Gaza war, the Russia-Ukraine war, potential war in Taiwan, and wars around the world in Congo and in Sudan right now, 4 wars. Many people don't even know about the last 2 I mentioned. The West has underarmed itself. We have not invested enough in military. It's sad to say, but it's true. And we need to rearm. We need to have new innovation. We need to address the issues of drones and mobility, lighter weight communications, lighter weight military kinetic weaponry. We need to be more lethal to the bad guys and more safe for our guys and gals. So defense is a very important area that will, under this administration, receive more funding, and I think under NATO more funding, and I think Israel, Ukraine are all going to be stepping up their expenditures. So defense is an area that can really use some Silicon Valley innovation. Too long it's been prime contractors with what's called cost plus payments. Silicon Valley doesn't work on cost plus. Silicon Valley works more on competition, fast iteration of innovation cycles, let the best technology compete, and there's a fast iteration of better and better technologies. Let's say in new materials, very exciting. It's not an area I know a lot about, but I know that, again, computers will be able to help us design new types of materials. They're starting to be applied in fabrics, in metals, in manufacturing. We need to build houses in a cheaper way, so automated manufacturing. All these areas, logistics, healthcare, can be made more efficient. And I think the key is applying new data and new algorithms to that data to be smarter about what we already have. And that will enable us to do not only better productivity in what we're doing, but also do new things that we've never been able to do before. Mm-hmm. That's the promise of the future. And entrepreneurs are the ones who will drive it forward.
Amazing. Well, since I want to be mindful of your time and we're in the last 1 minute fair round for you. Okay, so what's your favorite book?
My favorite book is the Bible. That's a shocking answer for Silicon Valley. I want all of you to read the Bible. If you're really afraid of that, read Dennis Prager's version called The Rational Bible. You can suspend all belief of God. It doesn't really matter. It is a guidebook for human behavior. Genesis is about families. Exodus is about liberation, personal liberation from demons and so on, and national liberation from oppression and slavery. Okay, and Leviticus and others move on, but at least read the first 2 books of the Bible. You might think it's silly and it's old-fashioned. You will come away a wiser, better, stronger person and a better entrepreneur, believe it or not. It also teaches you a lot about ethics, how to treat people fairly, rules of judgment. Don't put your finger on the scale. Be equal-minded. You shouldn't treat a poor person better or a rich person better. Equal justice under law. Those are all principles that come from the Bible. So that's my favorite book.
Wow. Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Repeat?
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
My dinner party. Oh my goodness. That is fun. This is a strange one because she's dead. I'm going to invite Queen Elizabeth, the late Queen Elizabeth, not her husband. I don't care for him so much. I really like Queen Elizabeth. He's okay, but she was exceptional. I would invite President Trump. I would invite Zelensky so they can make up and kiss and move forward. I would invite Elon Musk. He's exceptional. Probably Peter Thiel to add some additional intellectual heft. Let's see, some scientist. Who can I find that's a scientist? I don't know. Somebody from MIT or Stanford. I don't know. Somebody, a great professor who's really at the edge of quantum, maybe, or at the edge of AI and biotech. Those three areas I think are just absolutely fascinating, endlessly productive for us to learn about. And I'd invite a rabbi or a priest or a minister or an imam or a wise man of some of the holy religions to bring us home on a human level. I want things to be human-centric. And I'm going to jump to another thing. I'm going to jump to energy. You didn't ask me about energy, but I want the world to appreciate the needs of the world for more energy. There are 700 million people on Earth that have no electricity whatsoever. There are 4 billion people on Earth that have less than 4 hours of electricity a day. We need to build more power plants around the world. Zero energy is a worse fate than climate change, in my opinion, to be very controversial. We need to help poor people have enough energy so they don't have a miserable life. They can have a basic middle-class standard of living. Then we can worry about issues. We can adapt and adopt technologies that will help us keep safe and dry and clean and not burn up in a crisp. The future is very bright. I want people to think about and know that. And so the people that I would invite to my dinner party, I also want to have a young person who's a new entrepreneur. I talked about all these famous people, but I want somebody who's nobody's ever heard of. And I'll let you pick that person, Grace. But I want somebody, because I was given a lot of opportunities as a kid. I want everybody to have that opportunity to be with the big people at the table and learn from them and teach us, because you, whether you're from a famous family or not, whether you're from a rich family or a poor family, whether you're well-educated or you're just starting out, you have something to contribute. Every person does. We are all created in God's image. That's the metaphor, whether you believe it or not. We are all equal in that respect, and we all have something to contribute, and it's better when we do it together.
Where can we find you outside of work?
Outside of work, I'm with my family a lot. I'm in Washington, D.C. today, going to the State of the Union address tonight. I'm going to be at a conference on defense. I'm going to be at a conference from that's the Reagan Institute. I'm going to be at a conference tomorrow at the Milken Institute on Finance. I am very involved in philanthropy and a lot of things. We travel a lot in the summer. We often go to Israel. We often go to France. We go back to our house in San Francisco, where we still have a lot of friends and family and have an office. We love travel. We love learning about other cultures. One of my favorite cultures is the ancient Mayan culture. So we love going to archaeological sites in the Yucatan Peninsula and learning about that amazing culture, which sort of vanished about 1,000 years ago. But wow, was it amazing in many ways. Astronomy, agriculture, science, warfare, philosophy, the religious cults, the artifacts and the artistic qualities of that people were brilliant. So I love to learn about that.
Wow, David, I feel like you have such a wide range of knowledge in literally everything. And thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was such a masterclass for business and life. Yeah, I don't know how you keep track on so many different things in life, because yeah, you're so well-rounded.
Well, thank you, Grace. You're charming. You're brilliant. Life is not a dress rehearsal. So as they say, like an anti-meme, suck the marrow out of life, jump in, take it with both hands, enjoy it, grapple with it. There are difficulties that you need to overcome. There are joys you need to experience. There are gifts that you have to give. So that's the challenge. And carpe diem, seize the day.
Thank you so much, David. Appreciate you. Okay, let me quickly